the thing that punched my inner child right in the gut. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey. I'm a therapist and we talk about therapy things on this channel. Today we're talking about Inside Out 2 because I went and saw it and I really liked it. There were some core themes that jumped out at me that I want to talk about, besides the fact that I just really enjoyed the movie. Before we get into that, I do want to be clear. I have a thing. I have a medical thing. It doesn't matter, but part of the complications of this medical thing is that it's like kind of difficult for me to emote right now. I didn't realize how much I use my mouth in like expressing emotion, and I can't really move my mouth very much without being in pain. So if I look very flat affect today, that's why. It's not that I'm not enjoying being here or that I'm mad. It's just that I can't really move my top lip. So it is what it is. We're just going to do our best to power through because I talk for a living, as it were. So that's that. Okay. So like I mentioned, there's a bunch of stuff that I really enjoyed that's like very tongue-in-cheek and funny, which if you've seen the first movie, that wasn't a surprise to me. I figured that would be there. But especially like them using literal projections for Riley's anxiety and like putting that in her mind, and the sarcasm, like all of that was very cute and fun. But I think in the way that I do, there was like therapy learning that's useful for us to unpack. So I want to talk about 3 things that just kind of stuck out to me. A lot of it being related to like inner child stuff, which is always a really fun, high octane time. So let's talk about that. The first thing that I want to talk about is a thing that I actually probably bore my clients to death with, and that I feel like I shout from the rooftops on the channel all the time, but because it came up in the movie, I think it's worth addressing again, which is the importance of like the love and acceptance for our whole selves, rather than just the parts of ourselves that are like convenient or that are socially acceptable. If you've seen the movie, I can't really show you clips of it, A, because it's not on streaming services, and B, because it'd probably get copyright claimed and taken down. But if you've seen the movie, the progression of the plot is such that at the beginning, there's this core belief that Riley has that she is a good person. That's kind of like pure and untainted. And there's a sequence at the beginning of the movie where Joy takes these embarrassing memories and these like kind of bad things that have happened to Riley and like yeets them to the back of the mind. She talks about like we keep the best and toss the rest, right? And so that forms this core belief that Riley has that's like very pure and like only related to the positive things about herself, which is obviously like feels good, you know? And the central conflict is anxiety forming a different core belief about her not being good enough, and them trying to sort of fight back and forth to like reinstill this very pure belief. And the resolution of this is that at the end of the movie, they end up kind of merging these 2 things together to talk about how like, yes, sometimes she is selfish and sometimes she's afraid and sometimes she gets embarrassed, and also she's kind, and also she's a winner, and she believes that other people matter and that she's an empathic person, right? And so all of these things kind of add up to this fluctuating in color and design part of herself that forms a core belief that is like nuanced and actually realistic about a person. And this is a thing that I talk to my clients about all the time, because it's very tempting, especially for those of us who are very self-critical of ourselves, to be like, well, you know, these shitty things that I believe about myself keep me grounded or keep me from being shitty or mean, right? Like I need to think these negative things about myself in order for me to not like, you know, be, I don't know, selfish or self-important. And that's not necessarily true. And it is important for us to form this like whole picture, right? It's important for us to integrate these like shitty things about ourselves in a way that is honoring of their authenticity while also not allowing those to sit front and center. I think on the opposite end of the spectrum, like not a lot of us really struggle with this, to be fair, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, it's important to not let these beliefs about like, I'm a kind person, I'm a good person, to be in the way of us doing self-improvement and being like accepting of the parts of ourselves that are kind of flawed. I did want to talk about this though, because we have talked on the channel before a couple of times, probably on the pod. I'll put the link to the podcast in the description. We have a podcast, by the way. It's very fun. But we've talked about how sometimes this belief about us being a good person can sometimes get in the way of us being a good person, which sounds shitty and backwards, but give me a minute. Let me explain. What I mean when I say this is that there's sort of a prevailing thought on like the internet at large about how when we engage in the world and in relationships in this very blind way about like, of course I'm a good person, and so therefore I couldn't do bad things, that becomes a hindrance, right? That becomes a problem problem and a barrier to us being able to really absorb when somebody says like, hey, you did a shitty thing, right? Or you behaved in a way that hurt me. If we allow this core belief of like, I'm a good person to just like get in the way of that, then we're not taking in feedback about ourselves, and we're then getting in the way of our own self-improvement, which sucks, right? I think the thing about this like core symbolism throughout the whole movie that's really important is honoring that we can be a good person who has flawed bits of us like mixed in there, right? And that's what makes up a picture of an actually good person. And so being able to acknowledge like, yes, I'm a good person. And also sometimes I do shitty shit, right? Sometimes I'm embarrassing, or sometimes I'm wrong, or sometimes, I didn't properly like read a room, or I didn't understand how I hurt someone. And so I can acknowledge that, yes, I'm a good person and I behaved in a way that wasn't good, right? It's fundamentally a lesson in shame and like why shame sucks, how it's important for us to be able to sit with feelings like guilt or sadness rather than allowing shame to just like eclipse that whole thing, which as a side note, I am a little bit sad that we didn't get like a cameo from shame anywhere in the movie. I was hoping that we would see a little bit of that because I don't know about you, but puberty was like a very shame wrought time for me. That's neither here nor there. But again, I just want to drive home the point, the work of being like a person who's continuing to improve, who is safe and good in our relationships, is in acknowledging that we are good and also flawed, that it's possible for us to need feedback and that we should be available for that without going to this place of like, I'm a terrible person, no one loves me, I'm unworthy, and I'm like fundamentally not worthy of love, because that's not helpful either. Okay, before we talk about that, I want to talk to you about this week's sponsor, which is Dipsea. I am actually going on vacation soon, and I've been filling up my reading list, which has been easier than ever with Dipsea's audio stories. For those of you that don't know, Dipsea is an app that is filled with hundreds of short and spicy audio stories, and their library is massive. So while we all know that I'm going to be frequenting the enemies to lovers section, Dipsea has everything from second chance romances to immortal fae smut. So regardless of what you're into, Dipsea has us all covered. New content also gets added every single week, so you can binge your faves or you can get lost in something new. And Dipsea's audio stories are genuinely such a game changer because they're such high quality stories and they're really engaging and interesting, and I really want y'all to experience that. So for listeners of the show, Dipsea is offering an extended 30-day free trial when you go to dipseastories.com/Mickey. That's 30 days of full access for free when you go to DIPSEA stories.com/Mickey, dipseastories.com/Mickey. Thank you again to Dipsea for sponsoring this week's video. Let's go ahead and hop back in. Okay, the second thing that I want to talk about, which might seem kind of backwards, is the importance of anxiety. I feel like this is also one of the things that I sort of shout from the rooftops and also probably irritate my clients with by talking about, but it's important because the movie obviously heavily features anxiety as one of the new emotions. She's sort of like the main, like baddie in the movie. Not like that, you know what I mean? But she ends up sort of taking over Riley's mind, and like everything about Riley becomes this very anxious and like sort of like thing, which like is very relatable. If you're an anxious person, I think you'll probably relate to that feeling of just like anxiety being in the driver's seat. And I talk to my clients about this ad nauseum, and also you guys on the channel, that anxiety is something that does actually serve an evolutionary purpose, right? Like we have anxiety for a reason. It's wired into our brains on purpose. And so the work is in figuring out how to integrate that anxiety in a way that actually makes sense. There is a sequence in the beginning of the movie, I'll try to show you guys like screenshots or pictures if I can, where anxiety is like, I don't think we should do this, like I don't think we should be like behaving in this way, or like we should pay attention to what the coach is saying. And Joy is like, it's fine, be silly, be happy, and it actually gets Riley in trouble, right? And so this is what I mean when I talk about the importance of anxiety. It sometimes is a really useful vehicle. It's a skill almost, that like as much as it would be nice for us to never experience anxiety or fear or sadness, the truth is that we do in fact live in a society with sometimes very complex social norms and interactions and situations that are difficult to work through, right? And so anxiety can serve the purpose of helping us to read that room, or to like remember, last time I wasn't like paying attention to this thing and that didn't really work out so well. And so in this moment, like maybe I'm a little anxious, but it's because my brain and my lived experience is trying to tell me like, don't do that, right? Like don't do that thing that didn't work out well last time. This is, I think, powerful social and emotional learning. This is part of what evolving as a person looks like. This is literally why our brains are elastic and why they are wired in such a way that we can learn from experiences and like connect new neurons, right? And make new memories and connections and all those things. And Anxiety is something that is very powerful if we don't learn how to temper it, right? Obviously, that's the whole point of the movie, is that anxiety literally takes over the brain, and there's all kinds of terrible things that happen, which, by the way, as a side note, I did really enjoy the way that they represented. That sounds bizarre, but I found it, I don't know, like profound. The way that they represented panic attacks, and that like swell and surge of anxiety that does feel very much like it's out of your control and like it's taking over your brain and your body, and like you can't really figure out a way to stop it or deal with it. I'm going to have to swish lidocaine because I can't think. Mm-hmm.
Okay, no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not ready today.
Mm-hmm.
It will be ready in the future. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
We did it! Oh no, we didn't do it. Ready?
Now my lips are numb. American healthcare is a racket. Which also, can we just talk about the fact that we have healthcare? Like, pretty good healthcare.
We still always have to try so hard to get.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Or no healthcare? Just get fucked.
For everything.
So sorry. Okay, we took a quick break because I had to swish lidocaine in my mouth. So if I'm talking like I just got back from the dentist, that's why. Regardless, I think this is a useful lesson in why... I don't even remember what I was talking about. Regardless, the key point that I want to drive home here is that anxiety is something that is like a useful tool from an evolutionary perspective, and it's really important for us to learn how to regulate that and how to be mindful of the way that that's showing up for us in everyday life and whether or not we're allowing anxiety to sit in the driver's seat. This is something that I tell my clients all the time, is that we want to be able to be aware of anxiety, to notice it, but then to make intentional decisions about what we're doing with the anxiety, right? The difference here is in noticing that there's anxiety there rather than just being taken like on a wild goose chase and having anxiety like run away with you. And also making an informed decision about like, okay, yes, I'm noticing this anxiety. Is this founded in reality? Is this like actually a useful observation for me, right? To what degree can I make it a decision that's informed by this anxiety without letting this anxiety be the decision, right? At the end, obviously, there's this like moment where you see all of the integration of all of her emotions in her core self. And I think this is like a beautiful representation of what that actually looks like. Okay, one last thing in this section that I wanted to talk about, which is the moment where Riley's having a panic attack and anxiety is like swirling all around the control panel. I thought it was kind of beautiful and poignant the way that they represented the antidote to this panic attack and this like overwhelm of anxiety being the integration of all of her emotions, especially the ones that she had bottled up quite literally. I feel like this is a nice message about the way that emotions work, which is that they are all existing in tandem, right? Often we have this belief that we can numb or ignore or push away the emotions that are uncomfortable, like anxiety and shame and sadness and all the things, right? That's not true. The reality is that if we numb or bottle up one, we're numbing and bottling up all of them. And so Riley having this moment where like all of the emotions learn how to work together and like have this moment of like none of us get to control her, right? We don't get to decide, I think was a really nice representation of like what it looks like to be present and to be in a like embodied place with all of your emotions where you're honoring that they all exist, that they all deserve to be there, that they all have like a purpose and you need all of them. And again, it's ultimately about honoring the things that are most like present and poignant about our core selves and our core beliefs and all of those things. Okay, the last thing I want to talk to y'all about is the thing that punched my fucking inner child right in the gut, which is why I wanted to make this video like generally really, which is the importance of having safe people around you in your adolescence during this very formative time, which I think is like pretty heavily represented in this movie. And I really wonder when companies like Pixar make movies like this, I'm like, are y'all aware of like what it is that you're representing? Or did you guys do this on accident? Because it actually is like a really beautiful representation of how important and like what a pivotal moment it is in adolescence during all of this like forming and storming and these like very intense emotions to have adults who are there, who are stable, who are steady and can like hold that space for you to be safe people for you. Because for those of us who didn't have that experience, it like really highlights what a diverging path people take when you have those adults versus when you don't. There's a lot of depiction in the movie of Riley learning these really important lessons about herself and about friendship, about relationships and like the people around her, mostly because she has people to hold this space for her and to be present for her in these like really pivotal moments. The thing that stuck out to me first and foremost is this moment where the puberty alarm, goes off and Riley starts having these emotional responses to things that are like so incongruent, right? Which is like very relatable. I think a lot of us went through that, in or out of puberty. But then Riley's mom, we get a cutaway into Riley's mom's emotions and their little control panel, right? And what we see is them being like, okay, we knew this would happen. Like, play it cool. Everybody be chill. And it's so sweet and heartwarming because, again, like from the outside, you're like, oh yeah, this makes sense, right? But like for those of us who grew up with abusive parents or emotionally immature parents or just like parents who were ill-equipped to deal with pubescent children, that's not the case. Like, I can assure you that that's not what the control panel looks like for a lot of our parents. And so this is like why I said I kind of wonder, like, are you guys aware of what you're doing? Or is this just like, did emotionally healthy people make this movie and y'all don't even know? But I think I had a similar emotional response to this moment that I did to the Barbie movie and seeing like a loving mother-daughter relationship represented where like it's heartwarming and it's sweet and it's like touching because it's just emotional. But there was also like a lot of grief for me in watching this, like, seemingly benign moment kind of play out. And then in the end, we see these sequence of events. Don't laugh. We see this sequence of events where Riley is like emotional and her parents are all there and like supporting her and all this stuff. And there is like a feeling of grief for me about like, that was not my experience, right? And I know for a fact for a lot of my clients, that was not their experience also. And so I think it's just a nice moment to pause and like honor that is real and true. For a lot of us, we had to do this learning that Riley was doing as a teenager as adults, right? We had to become our own safe people and we had to like sort of manually create this environment where we were learning these lessons and we were doing all of this experimentation and like in real time learning that we should have done or should have been able to do as teenagers and young adults. But like we were robbed of that experience by having like abusive environments or emotionally ill-equipped parents and all of this kind of stuff. So I wanted to address it here because if you are a person who did that or is still doing that, please know that you're not alone in that and that you are not flawed or wrong or bad, right? A lot of us who have done this more manualized approach to that emotional and social learning in adulthood tell ourselves these things about how like everybody else gets it, right? Or like I'm a bad person, especially for those of us who into adulthood struggled with the like sort of stereotypical pubescent selfishness or self-absorbedness. You were robbed of developmentally appropriate experiences and that's not your fault, right? We tend to label ourselves as these like flawed or shitty or bad people, but the truth is that you're playing catch up for experiences that the adults in your life should have been providing you with, but they failed you. And so having to learn how to do that as an adult, first of all, is really difficult because it feels like you're on a fucking island, right? Like nobody else is doing these things and that's really scary. But also you're doing them at a stage of life that is like inappropriate, right? It's like not developmentally common for you to be doing that. It's common to be fair, but you know what I mean. And so I just wanted to take a moment to pause and like acknowledge that and just like put it out there. If you're a person who's doing that or has done that, you are very seen, you are very valid. And also for what it's worth, like you're in really good company, both here on the channel specifically, but also generally, it is so much more common than you would think for people to be having to create their own developmentally appropriate milestones in adulthood, and that we as a society just don't talk about it, which I think personally is a fucking crime. I think we should talk about it a lot more because so many of us feel alone and feel isolated and like on an island. And for what it's worth, this also compounds to create like a greater risk in our mental health and well-being because we do feel like we're the only fucking person who had to do that. And like, that's not true. If anything, I would say it's more common than not to have these, like developmentally inappropriate milestones where you have to kind of create this learning for yourself. So just know that you're not alone in that you're not anything or you're not doing anything bad or wrong. And again, that you're in good company. And also you're like very cherished here on the channel. I really appreciate the community of people who are so similar and kind and like delightfully weird in our corner of the internet. You're a very cherished part of our chosen family here. There is obviously a lot for us that we could unpack in this movie. If you guys want me to make further like follow up about this, I'm happy to do that. However, I think we're going to call it there for today. Also, I see see you. I know that you, listen, I said something about how like, no one wants to listen to me talk for 2 hours. And you guys were like, you have a podcast, hello, and you stream for 6 hours. So like, fair enough. Touche. And also, I think it's good for us to cap main channel videos at a certain point, so I can make follow-up if you guys want me to, and you can just watch them back to back if you want to watch me talk for 2 hours. So love you all the most. If you want to support the video, you can like the video, you can subscribe. We do stuff like this, and we also do more educational type of things, so I'd love to have you stay for that, and you can share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow, and I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.
You said doo-doo.
I did say doo-doo. I'm leaving it.